The Tale of the Fiddle Player. One night, a young boy had decided to visit a cemetery. The young boy had never visited the cemetery, at least at night. His name was Lucas. Lucas had passed by a few times with his parents, but had never been there alone. A cold wind was blowing through the trees, and the light from the moon cast shadows across the gravestones. Lucas shivered from the cold breeze, but he knew he must stay. That's what he'd been told by an old woman.
If you want to learn how to fiddle, go to the graveyard alone and practice all night. But don't be greedy,
She whispered, and Lucas had seen fear in her eyes. A part of Lucas wanted to run home, but he decided to force himself to sit on a gravestone and tuck his fiddle under his chin. He drew the bow across the strings. The screeching and squawking were unbearable. He stopped for a moment and heard a chorus of frogs croaking in the nearby meadow. They sound better than I do, he groaned. But he took up his fiddle and decided to try again. This time, he hit a few melodious notes. Lucas was so excited that he didn't even notice a whiff of smoke in the air. He practiced hour after hour, and the smoke grew thicker and thicker. But Lucas noticed nothing but his music. The screeching and the squawking were gone now. Still, though, he wasn't satisfied.
I wish I were the best fiddler in the world,
He shouted at the top of his lungs. "You can be," said a voice from behind his back. Lucas whirled around, his heart in his throat. There stood a horrifying figure, dressed in a long black cloak lined with red and smoldering at the hem. His black boots were licked by tongues of flame, and his pointed tail thrashed smoke from side to side. Lucas cringed, for now he knew who'd been teaching him to fiddle that night. "Give it here, boy," demanded the long-horned red devil, and he began to play. His fingers danced over the strings and firmly guided the bow. Songs burst forth, so bewitching that Lucas could think of nothing else.
I didn't know you could play,
Gasped Lucas. "Play?" snapped the devil. "I invented the fiddle." And he began a fiery tune. His fingers moved in a blur.
Well, I'd give anything to play like that,
Lucas cried out, and an evil grin spread across the devil's face. "Oh, do you now? Even your soul?" Lucas felt the hot breath of the devil upon him, He drew back, shuddering. But then the devil resumed playing. "You can keep your soul, at least until you die," said the devil. "Then it's all mine." He played so passionately that Lucas began to clap his hands and stomp his feet. "Tell me now here, boy, where can you find a better deal?" the devil asked. So Lucas agreed to sell his soul, his fears swept aside by the devil's music. But he could hardly stand doing what the devil demanded next. "To seal our pact, you must, swallow my spit."
Ew, gross! I can't do that,
said Lucas. "Well, then I guess you don't want to be the world's best fiddler."
I do, more than anything,
said Lucas. And he squeezed his eyes shut and swallowed deeply. The devil's spit was hot and sulfurous. Lucas could feel it burning all the way down to his stomach. He thought he was going to be sick. But then the devil handed Lucas his fiddle, and all seemed well. A flaming hole opened in the ground, and the gleeful Prince of Darkness sank from sight, sucking the smoke down with him. Lucas fiddled and danced all the way home. From that night on, no one could get enough of Lucas's music fiddling. He made that fiddle laugh and sing, and when he played for parties, everyone danced until the roosters crowed. He played upriver and down, over the hill and through the valley. He never tired of playing. When Lucas was young, his fiddle sang with joy. But as he grew older, sadness crept in. The thought of spending eternity in the devil's realm preyed upon his mind. So Lucas decided to scheme. He had to think of a way to outwit the devil himself. On one moonlit night, Lucas had the perfect idea. He jumped out of bed and raced out to the cemetery. The slithering shadows made Lucas wonder if spirits had slipped from their graves themselves. He shuddered, but he sat on the mossy tombstone once more and tucked his fiddle beneath his chin. Then he dragged his bow across the strings, making them screech as they did so long ago. Just when Lucas thought he couldn't stand his awful fiddling a moment longer, a fiery hole opened up. And once again, that's right, you guessed it, the Prince of Darkness stood before him. Lucas leapt to his feet, trembling with fear, but he continued to play. "Stop that squawking, boy," bellowed the devil. "You are hurting my ears."
Sorry, I can't.
This is the best I can do," said Lucas. The devil snorted fire and stomped his cloven hooves right through the charred soles of his boots. "I guess I'm no longer the best fiddler in the world," trying so desperately to keep his voice from quivering. "You are," bellowed the devil. "Now try harder." And he threw a thunderbolt so close to Lucas's head that he curled his hair. Lucas jumped back, but he made his fiddle screech even worse than before. Goose flesh crept up his neck, making his hair stand on end. But he looked the devil in the eye. "Our pact is broken." "It is not!" screamed the devil, holding his hands over his ears. "It is," said Lucas, scraping his bow across the string once more. "All right," the devil snarled. "You can keep your soul on one condition. You must never play the fiddle again." "Never play the fiddle again?" Lucas trudged home, sobbing. He put his fiddle in a trunk and closed the lid. Then, he took to his bed, feeling old and weary. He shriveled a little each day and spoke to no one. But when his family gathered around, he made one last request. "I want to hold my fiddle just one more time." He ran his fingers over the smooth wood and quietly fingered the strings. Then, in a rush of unexpected strength, he played a haunting melody. "Now put it away," he said. And they did. But before he could sink back into his pillow, terror overtook him. He tried to cover his eyes from something no one else could see. A bolt of lightning hit. It blinded everyone around him. And when they recovered their sight, they couldn't see anything on the bed except scorched sheets. And when they looked for the fiddle, they saw a smoking hole in the lid of the trunk and nothing inside. Good evening, listeners. I want to thank you for tuning in tonight. My apologies for no new tales last week. With it being Thanksgiving weekend, I found myself preoccupied with my own traditions. But don't worry, you can always count on me, the teller. So starting again next week, every Wednesday night at 11 p.m., an all new brand new tale. And if that doesn't make you happy, then this next part will. As of Monday night, we successfully, with your help, for tuning in every week, liking and sharing, we have now crossed into 20,000 streams on the podcast. So I want to thank each and every one of you that continue to show your support and your love for the podcast. I couldn't have done it without any of you. And for most of you who have been there since day one, and even if you haven't listened to every single episode, because as much as I would like to think everybody that I know has listened to every single episode, that's a lot to ask. But regardless, whether you liked one show, or you liked the next, or you told somebody about it at work, or you told your neighbor who you know is scared shitless of even their own shadow, but you told them about this podcast, I want to thank you all for doing that. It seems like just yesterday, when this show started, I started this podcast with a thought of just telling original tales, bringing it back to the golden age of entertainment, and giving you just a little bit of a fright, making you check behind your door just another second, or checking behind you when you get out of your car just to make sure you're all alone. That is what I call success. So now that we've hit 20,000 streams, on to the next. More streams, more audiences, bigger stories, and bigger casts. So thank you once again, listeners. We have now crossed into 20,000 streams, and it's because of you. So thank you with all my heart. And make sure to like, subscribe, and leave us a rate and review on iTunes. Let's make the boys at iTunes just a little less sure of themselves.